Well, welcome Long Island, from Montauk to Manhattan. Today I want to get into my message, and I might do a little storytelling today. And I've been getting this message for a while, and I'm asking God for the grace to speak this truth to the body of Christ. I remember as a young man, I want to give you a little background of myself, that I had a love for my dad that I still have, and my dad is still alive. I remember waiting by the door for him to come home, and my dad was supporting 5 children, so he wasn't always around like I would expect, or anybody would expect, because he had a lot of bills, and we understand this. Society puts a demand on the father of a house, but that still doesn't negate that I would wait and wait for my dad to come home. I remember saying, "Mom, when's Dad coming home? Mom, when's Dad coming home?" And I remember thinking, "Oh, well, he'll be home at 7 o'clock, and then he'd come home sometimes 8 o'clock. And I remember my heart as a young man was starting to get hurt, because I said, "My God, I hope Dad can come to my baseball game." And he never was able to show up. And it wasn't something, because he could listen to this message. It wasn't something that he did on purpose. He tried to do the best that he could do with the ability he had, the strength he had, and the resources he had. And I remember as a young man realizing how important it was to be a father. I understood that things got in the way of different circumstances in life, because the pressures of life put a burden on sometimes the fathers, and in this day it's the fathers and mothers. But I realized, I was smart enough to realize that a father played a great role. I remember when my father would go to work, he would just come in my room and stand by the door at 5:30 in the morning. And immediately, in 10 seconds, he would just stand by the door. I was up, said, "Dad, I'm coming to work with you today. I'm coming to work with you." And most of the time he says, "Okay." But then there were times he says, "Oh, son, I can't take you today." And I remember feeling the disjointedness between me and my dad. I remember starting to feel like, wow, man, I'm not going to be able to be with Dad today. And I remember a lot of times we would go weeks where I was able to be with him, and then would go weeks where he just was on a different mission and he couldn't take me with him. And I remember the disappointment. I'm not saying the disappointment came from him, but I remember as a young man sensing the disappointment in different things with my dad. And I remember as I got older, I started to realize that maybe there was a deficit in me, that I lacked some of the things that I felt I needed. Now, I've got a lot of siblings. If they were to listen to this message, they were in the same household. They wouldn't feel the same exact way that I'm feeling. We all are in a home and view things differently. And my message is not about my family and my father. My message is about fathers. And I want to just explain a little bit further. I remember working hard for my dad, always wanted to impress him, always wanted to do far beyond what he would expect. And believe me, as a young man, I did far exceed what a father would expect. I would keep the house nice on the exterior. I would cut the grass twice a week. I would clean the cars. I was just trying to obtain the love of my father. Now, I believe that God put that in me, that someday he knew that I would talk to a generation about fathers. He knew that if I could feel a deficit, if I can go through an experience on my own, that I would be able someday to portray to you that Jesus Christ says, "I'll stick closer to you than a brother." I believe Christ has given us the resources, that the Father has become the Father of light, the Father that loves our soul. God, being a Father, put his son, think about this, on the cross of Calvary. It cost God the Father everything when he put the Son on the cross. I tell you that in us is the ability to radically be concerned about our children. My God, if I was to tell you that, some of the things I fear is, God forbid, losing my child at an age before I would be to die. Could you imagine that? Some of you on the other side have just heard me and said, my God, I've been through that. I lost my son. I lost my daughter. And I know the pain. Well, I want to tell you that God, the Father, knows the pain of losing a son prematurely, without cause. Some of you can relate to that aspect. But I want to tell you that there's a promise in the Bible, Malachi, the 4th chapter. See, I will send you the prophet Elijah before the great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the father to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, or else I will come and strike the land with a curse. My God, people, hear me. God is going to do some great and mighty things. Paul the apostle says, we don't have many fathers. I believe today that we need to rise up in our callings. But not only that, there are men that now need to understand it's time to father the body of Christ. I believe that my father, even as I got older, he started to teach me about business. He started at a young age having lessons with me about how to conduct business. He taught me. He used to do mock setups with me. I'll never forget it. My dad owned many real estate offices, and I used to come into his office, and he'd say, okay, son, I want you to get on the phone. I want you to talk to this customer. And I was only 14. And he would have me call them up, and he would sit there, and then he would go over it with me. And my God, I tell you, till today, I could remember being in his office over there in Lindenhurst and him taking me in and saying, well, son, you did good on that call, but let me teach you how to do this. I tell you, body of Christ, leaders of God, people that are in the body of Christ, hear me. This is the hour to father people. We've got to become apostolic fathers. We can no longer be saying, hey, wait a minute, I think like I'm 30 years old. There are people that God has put over the body of Christ, but it becomes an unselfish love that we need to acquire from God to become true fathers in the faith. My God, I tell you this, there is more manipulation, hear me people, there is more manipulation around the word fathers in the body of Christ than I'm willing to admit on the radio or get into any confrontation. But I want to tell you that when you do not have a father that is nurturing, I tell you, people will come and manipulate you and be as a father to you, but take advantage. There's only one father you're given on earth, and no father could ever be substituted by another man. And I tell you, if you've lost your father and you've lost your way, I want to tell you that God the Father says, I'll become your father. When I get to heaven, I believe that I only borrowed my children and I did the best that I can do. Sometimes I'm the worst critic of myself because then I did business 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I ran the gamut to become, in the eyes of the world, successful. And I've seen, as I look back through the times, that my God, I wish I was there more for my children. I gave up plenty to become successful in the eyes of the world. And I believe my children appreciate it because I was able to do for them. And I believe that I appreciate what my dad did because he was able to do for me. My father put me in business. He gave me the money to start my own business when I was 17 and a half years old. And I want to tell you, my father came down and he would sit with me. He would leave his real estate practice practice, come down for a few hours and mentor me as I was building one of the biggest garden centers on Long Island. I'm telling you, I owe it to my father, but I see such a deficit in the body of Christ. I see men that are 40 years old that never had fathers, and now all of a sudden they make somebody their proverbial father, and it just doesn't work because men don't have enough character to be a man's father spiritually. My God, they'll take advantage of that situation. But I tell you that God is going to now ask the body of Christ, those that are put in strategic positions, to become fathers to the body of Christ, that we would start to love the brethren unselfishly, that we would become apostolic. I want to say this also, if anyone has any suspicions or anything of, what I'm saying. Bishop D'Onofrio is a true father in the faith. I want to make sure I make that very clear. This man comes as a true father with no manipulation. But we need more like him to rise up and say, this is a father to the faith. We need to understand, like Paul said, I want to say this again, we don't have many fathers in the faith. And I tell you, without fathers in the faith, how are we going to take the 7 mountains that God speaks about? We've got to go now and speak to a lost and dying world. We've got to come in and affect cultures. We've got to come and affect regions. We've got to come now and become the manifestation of the sons of God. But I tell you, we cannot become who God said we will until we hear that we need fathers to father us in the body of Christ. We need true apostolic leaders that are going to rise up, and they're not going to say bless us for and no more, and they're going to have great trust in their sons to send them off to do the things that Christ asked us to do. I believe that's why he said send them out 2 by 2. I believe there's a concept in there that we have to learn. He didn't say go 1 by 1. He said go 2 by 2. God is into the community of believers coming together with apostolic fathers. Today I said this the best that I can, but I believe I'm going to continue in this vein in the next few weeks. So stay with me until I come back. Remember, your Father in heaven loves you, and I do